there's two things that I think are going to that impact 2022. One is right now, as we speak, Biden is in Philadelphia meeting with the Democrats on their retreat. Retreat is a great word for it. And there is push by, and we heard it from Clyburn, we heard it from Jayapal, we heard it from other Democrats to push Biden to take executive action on a host of things. I didn't see, student debt in there, but I'm sure someone's pushing that as well, hopefully. But everything ranging from, DACA to voting rights to, any type of relief for on unemployment or any type of material benefit that Biden can bring, since it's quite clear that the leadership of the Democratic Party has failed. Now, you could argue that Joe Manchin is just like a Superman, and there was no strategy that ever could have existed in any possible scenario, because Joe Manchin is so set in his ways and has only one set of incentives, and that is a deep abiding ideological or principled stance. Or you could believe that they failed at what their job is, which is to get their own party to vote for their own agenda and figure out a way to do it. But that agenda is dead legislatively, so they're pushing him. And the other sort of thing, it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to that and how they react to it at the White House. And the other thing is the gerrymandering. Just talk about the gerrymandering because it is not as apocalyptic as we thought it was going to be. In fact, it's better than we thought it was going to be. But it's not, and again, it's not because of chance. It's because people were ringing the bell, and it forced Democrats to do something.
Absolutely. It's actually, I was surprised. I had been under the impression that it was apocalyptic, that we were just going to, that it was going to be overwhelmingly favorable for the Republicans. And it turned out that it wasn't. And the reason is very interesting. It's because of state courts that, the Republicans tried, and they were turned back by state courts, which, has been sort of a backwater in politics. People don't think much about that. And in fact, I think most people probably vote for state judges and state Supreme Court judges. And they vote for them, right? It's not like this thing where we have, on the Supreme Court where it's a lifetime appointment. This is actually, it's a political job. And so people vote for them. And as it turns out, even in states that are dominated by Republicans, the state courts looked at these ridiculous maps that they were producing and said no. And as a result, and surprisingly, and this is probably only going to hold for this one cycle, maybe two if we're lucky, the Supreme Court decided not to intervene in that and allowed the state courts decisions to hold. And as a result, it appears that what we thought was going to happen with an extremely lopsided Republican-dominated new House seats, it turns out it's pretty much even. So it's a 50-50, now they seem to be very much, it's going to be a battle. This is going to be mano a mano next fall, but it seems to be very much, strongly held Democrats, strongly held Republicans, most of them. That's a very even split now, with very few swing districts in there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. But it's going to be close for the majority. Unless there's some kind of a bizarre blowout that we're not expecting, and that was not in the cards. Now, the thing that's important to keep in mind about this is that there is this thing called the independent legislature theory, which we've been talking about for some time, which is this idea that somehow or another state legislatures are God when it comes to elections, and they can pretty much do whatever they want. That's essentially what it is. It's held by its Federalist Society right-wing theory that's basically trying to take the running of elections completely out of the hands of the courts in the states, for this very reason, that courts tend to be more independent than legislatures, and they don't want them to have a say. And we saw that in 2020, where you had the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, for instance. They basically upheld the idea of mail-in voting and various things. And again, this time when they're doing the gerrymandering and redistricting. So the Supreme Court, we know there are three justices, the three, far right-wing nuts, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, who are definitely in favor of this independent legislator theory, which would allow the state legislature, which would require, actually not allow, require the state legislatures to be the final word, even to the point of perhaps after the election being able to come in and say, look, there's a dispute here. We don't really know who won, so we're going to assign our electors to go to Washington for the presidency. You can see where that's leading, right? So the Supreme Court, there are those three justices seem to be in favor. What we don't know is whether Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Roberts, any of, two of those three, are also going to be in favor in the future. I mean, I think it's hard to be optimistic about that, but I guess you never know. Right. But in the meantime, that's the good news for going into this election in the fall, is that it's not as terrible as we thought it was. On the other hand, the Brennan Center, that looks at constitutional issues, just came out with a report yesterday that said that election officials around the country are under extreme pressure, and they are resigning in droves. Apparently, 1/3 of all election officials have resigned, mostly due to intimidation. I mean, that is terrifying. And, we have reports of all of these, kind of dirty tricks and various machinations that are going on a local level. All of this is where Trumpism is now focusing, as we've heard, on a local level is where they're putting all their energy, and they're putting it towards this idea. And you've got Trump out there saying all the time, it's really important who counts those votes, I mean, basically paraphrasing an apocryphal, comment by Joseph Stalin, which of course he doesn't know, but I think he'd probably be proud to do it anyway. This is, so we've got two things going on here. On one hand, maybe there's a little sense that democracy sort of has prevailed in a certain way, and another one where you're just finding in this sort of local one-on-one level, it's getting really ugly.
All right. And let me just add one thing to what you said there, too. It was not just the courts, because it was the courts in some states, but in New York State and in Illinois and maybe in one or two other places around the country, we had Democrats counter gerrymander.
Right.
So in New York, I think we picked up 3 congressional seats. In Illinois, 2 congressional seats. And when we're talking about 218 to 218 in terms of lean Democrat versus lean Republican, we're down to almost like a split Congress. I mean, that's almost where we are right now anyways. Right. But 5 seats, a pickup of 3 in New York and a pickup of 2 in Illinois. And like I said, there's a couple other states. I think that also is a big part of it. So in other words, folks are going to hear that there was a lot of strum and drang about this and people were wrong, but that is not the case. That's like saying, hey, you were about to get hit by a bus, but that person yelled, get out of the way. And why were they so uptight about get out of the way? Because you got out of the way and then you didn't get hit by a bus. Well, I got out of the way from the bus because the person yelled at me. And that's what we were looking at. All right. Well, Heather, we will talk more about this, obviously, in the future. But always a pleasure to catch up with you. And thank you for your patience with us today. We had technical difficulties and really appreciate it. All right. Stay safe.
Thanks for having me.